A good book cover is like a little puzzle. It feels rewarding when you put the pieces together. This cover uses an illustration of a trust fall to symbolize fidelity. It's a good metaphor for the subject matter. There's a nice mood here that matches the title. The balloons are friendly and poignant. It's not metaphorical like the cover of Fidelity, the previous one. This is more meant to evoke a feeling, like a photo of a sunset. It's sensory. Here's a description from Amazon. Light and fun, unique and profound, the lessons drawn from Bob's life and attitude just might inspire you to be secretly incredible too. Light and fun, unique and profound. Yeah, I think the cover captures that pretty well. This cover is similar to the previous one. It's sensory. You can just smell that wet soil. The type has dirt around the edges, which pulls you into the dirt even further. If the type was floating above the soil, it wouldn't pull you in as much. So does the cover match the content? Here's the New York Times. Most of the time, in sections devoted to soil, land, sea, and seed, he weaves his ideas and changes in his thinking through a series of lively encounters with the food pioneers scattered hither and yon. Here's another review. He spends long hours with Klaus Martins, a farmer in the Finger Lakes region of New York, who gives him a new way of thinking about soil. Yeah, it sounds like the cover is an accurate reflection of the book. Also, it seems like soil plays a larger part in the story than I originally thought. This silent history cover is tricky. It's just a bunch of funky-looking letters, right? Let's take a closer look. First off, there are only words on the cover, so it's clear that the designer wants us to focus on that. The next thing I notice is the strong contrast between the blocky type and the handwritten words. Why choose two typefaces that are so different? The designer probably wants us to notice that difference. The blocky type is loud and takes up a lot of space on the page, but the handwriting is intimate. It feels like a secret being written in a journal. If this was a book about, say, World War II, the large blocky type would be the historical account of D-Day, but the handwriting might tell the story of a single U.S. soldier who landed on the beach that day and saw half of his friends get killed. It's the story behind the story that the designer wants us to notice. There's no deep concept on this book cover, but it works well. It simply references the cheap soy sauce that you'll find in any Chinese restaurant. By the way, this isn't a book about Chinese cuisine, but rather the Chinese takeout and delivery industry. So it makes sense that they would use a soy sauce packet. Wedding planners like to emphasize the magic and romance of a wedding. It's a once-in-your-life event, but in the same way that for-profit colleges take advantage of people, the wedding industry preys on that feel-good aspect of a wedding. This cover juxtaposes a cold, hard receipt with a beautiful wedding invitation. In one image, it pits the romance of a wedding against the hard reality of the cost. I love this cover. Some topics are so powerful that you can be very subtle in your design approach. There's such a solemn mood here. The gray clouds contribute to some of that, but the amount of space the designer reserves for the clouds helps even more. The sky takes up like 5/6 of the page. Notice how far back the camera is. This creates a feeling of contemplation. Remember this famous blue marble photo taken by the crew of the Apollo 17? It's like that. It forces you to reflect. If the photo was cropped closer, then the effect would be lost, because you'd get caught up in the details of the building. There's a character in this novel who invents devices to improve the lives of short people. You and I wouldn't know that, having not read the book. So the cover is probably more rewarding for people who have already finished it. But even so, the photo is engaging. It captures a moment of tension. You wonder what that girl is looking at. There's no heavy concept on this cover. It's just a beautiful illustration. It's a little bit more like packaging in that way. The designer just made an object that people would want to pick up. Wiretapping was at the heart of the Watergate scandal, so the designer here chose imagery to reflect that, something people would recognize. This cover makes you part of the story because when you open it, you see that you're being listened to. This is a fun one. There are two metaphors going on here. The first metaphor is how the words represent poets as a group of people. That's appropriate because poets live in words. The second metaphor is how the type is turned sideways on the hospital bed to indicate sickness. The direction of the words makes it look like an E. E. Cummings poem. There's a back and forth dynamic between the image and the title here that's interesting. The image draws us in, and then when we read the title, it confuses. The crossed out type makes me think something bad will happen to that deer. I still have no idea what this book is about, so maybe the designer just wanted to set a certain mood. Let's read some reviews. Oh, the Oprah magazine says, an irreverent, dark, hilarious novel about a man who finds a beloved historical figure hiding in his attic. The Wall Street Journal says, it blends tragedy, comedy, and satire in the mold of Samuel Beckett and Franz Kafka. So the darkness and tragedy part comes through for me, but the comedy doesn't. Maybe there's a subtle nod to Bambi here? Or maybe it would make more sense if we read the book. It seems like the designer was aiming to squarely communicate the tone of the book. Maybe she thought the mood was more important than the story. Sometimes you have to make that call because trying to communicate the tone and plot might be near impossible. It would be too complex.